Hello, you little mercurials, you clinical finishers. I hope the sun is shining on your glorious little heads wherever on God's green earth you're listening to this. Have you ever seen a bald man apply sunscreen to his head? I have, and I can assure you it's not something I was ready for. Imagine it right now. Picture a bald man. Who are you picturing? Are you picturing The Rock? He's probably the most famous bald man in the world, right? Is Jason Statham bald? Is he bald enough? Vin Diesel's probably the second most famous bald man in the world. Why are they all in The Fast and the Furious? Is Jason Statham in The Fast and the Furious? Is it really called The Fast and the Furious? I feel like your nan trying to discuss iCloud storage when I say The Fast and the Furious. I'm picturing Mr. Ted, who taught PE at my school. That's not really his name, but it sounds quite a lot like his name. I'll protect his identity, even though I'm not going to say anything nasty about him. Nothing that could damage his reputation. I'm not sure I have a sufficient platform to damage his reputation. Mr. Ted was sensationally bald. He had a smooth and shiny head, and unlike The Rock or Vin Diesel, he had a tastefully small head. There aren't many small-headed bald men about these days. He was fighting the good fight. I really liked Mr. Ted when I was at school. He was a sort of man who you knew had the capacity to get quite cross, but he didn't do it often. He looked like he would be quite world-weary too, one of those teachers who seemed like they'd been at school for generations. When I started at the school, I thought he was prickly and mean. I was quite an easily startled 13-year-old. I was at a new school, and I think I must have seen him shout once, and so I assumed he was prickly and mean. I thought all he cared about was winning sports fixtures. How much are school sports teachers judged on results? Could you be sacked from your job as a swimming coach if you go 2 years in a row without silverware? Have there been half-time talks in under-12C team football dressing rooms where the gaffer knows the kids have got 45 minutes to save his job? Seems silly. Mr. Ted turned out to be a real soft touch. Hey, anyone whose mind just did something nasty, behave yourselves. Mr. Ted turned out to be a sensitive and kind soul who was not at all world-weary. He wasn't even school-weary. I think I remember seeing him shed a tear during the school musical once. He was a truly gentle and kind man. Why did I start talking about bald men? Oh yeah, the sun shining down on your little heads. I wish for it, but if you have no hair, please do wear sunscreen. But apply it indoors, away from other humans. Most people aren't ready to see that. It's been sunny in London for the past 2 days, and suddenly it felt like spring. No, it felt like early summer, like May. Mild is the word I'd use. Mild. Mild is such an English word. It assumes that the weather is always bad. It treats bad as the starting point and then tells you how far from bad we are. It's like someone's asked, "What's the bad weather like?" You say, "Mild. Mildly bad." Which is good, I suppose. I think it's a lovely word. It has a lightness to it, a carefreeness. If you're listening to this within a week of release, then I'm probably somewhere where the weather is not so mild. I'm probably in the desert. I'm in Jordan, hiking the southernmost part of the Jordan Trail. I hope that's going all right. We're doing the driest section, which means we're currently trying to organise a water cache. A water cache is basically when someone drives out to the middle of the desert with a jerry can with 20 litres of water in it and leaves it somewhere for you. It's pretty cool. I'm recording this on the morning of the day I'm due to fly, and things have just kicked off in the Middle East between Israel and Iran, so I may be speaking too soon. Anyway, I'm going to assume that the world won't fall apart, and as I wander through the desert, I thought I'd share with you a story from the last long stroll I took in Armenia. I thought I'd read you one of a few short stories I've written inspired by my time there. I think there's a simple joy in immersion in a story, so I'll try and grab you with this one. Sit back and enjoy. It's called Leslie. The biggest, most ferocious dogs in Armenia have no ears. For a fighting dog, large ears are a target. Other dogs or bears may scratch or bite the ear, which weakens the dog with needless injury. If you have a dog whose stated raison d'être is combat, it only makes sense to crop its ears. Few things in the Armenian landscape look more sinister than these beasts, with muscles that glide over a swelling, pulsating frame, and on top of it, an earless head. In the hills, man is at its mercy. The days grew long and wearisome as Johnson Farside neared Dilijan. His bag weighed heavy and deep on his shoulders. The sky made shapes of grey and blue in turns. Hills rose and fell under his feet as he whistled and sang to no one. No one but a dog who had become his companion. The dog was small and ratty, useless to a shepherd for anything but a one-sided conversation. Its face was long and conical, its eyes bulging and quizzical, and its fur was stracciatella in splotches across a paltry torso, like the masterpiece of an angry oil painter in a hurry. The dog, whom Johnson had begun to address Leslie, had joined him 2 nights previously beside the village of Carmigu. Leslie was assisting a man in bringing home his herd of cows as Johnson set up camp in the early evening. Leslie didn't shout when he saw Farside, and in turn, Farside did not threaten to throw a rock at Leslie. Quite irregular, all things considered. Leslie simply waited while Johnson conversed with the man on the horse. "Can I put my tent here?" Nods. Johnson saw the man's lips quiver as if his mouth were full of questions. Nothing escaped. Johnson offered an answer anyway, miming walking with an index and middle wiggle, and uttering the name of his destination, Dilijan. The man did not move, as if this were not one of the questions in his mouth. Awkward and confused, man, dog, and horse stared Johnson in the face. The horse looked a shade bored, as horses often do. At last the man pricked the tension balloon with a wave of his hand, and the last of the evening sunshine illuminated the trio as they poked their way up the hill, with 30 cows in tow. Half an hour later, Leslie returned. Johnson had cooked his bulgur dinner and was on to dessert, the ubiquitous sugared dough balls, available from every shop in the country. Leslie approached gingerly, his expression one of gentle dim-wittedness. The dog would like a ubiquitous sugared dough ball, Johnson presumed. No, apparently not. He's just curious. As it transpired, Leslie did in fact enjoy a ubiquitous sugared dough ball when it was offered to him, and it remains the subject of debate whether the Machiavellian hound took Farside for a ride that evening. A strong argument in favour of the dog's fealty was found the following morning outside Johnson's tent, where Leslie lay in wait for his owner for a day. This type of dog was anathema to a city dweller like Farside, but the Caucasian countryside was quite familiar. Dog ownership is fast and loose, so it seems, and a dog has a master inasmuch as the master can persuade the dog to stay. Many dogs prefer an itinerant life, finding short-term leisures with similar interests which tend to include walking, running, and sitting in puddles. For the subsequent 48 hours, Leslie and Johnson Farside were man and dog, and as expected, the dog could offer nothing but companionship. He watched Johnson pick incorrect paths through dense foliage in the untouched northernmost part of Dilijan National Park. He listened as Johnson swore at bushes. He watched Johnson snap a hiking pole clean in half as he tottered across a boulder field. He sniffed the floor while Johnson tugged at the rusted spout of a dried-up water source in the vain hope that all it needed was a good rub. Leslie only waited and spectated, as devoted as he was useless. But it was simply by being quiet that Leslie earned Johnson's fondness. Johnson had spent many nights under the protection of dogs who barked at 20-minute intervals for 9 hours. Johnson liked dogs, but these experiences led him to question their intelligence. A bird landing on a leaf could induce total meltdown from a mutt, who would seem entirely unable to tell the difference between true danger and just a sound. It may have reduced the risk of an attack by a bear or a wolf, but compared to the certainty of a night lying awake enraged, Johnson would have taken his chances. At least they were devoted. But in a stroke of cynicism, this too reduced his respect for the dogs. There was a desperation there. But Leslie was cool, and their relationship was relaxed. Less master and charge, they were more acquaintances, heading the same way and preferring to travel together than alone. Leslie could have covered the distance in a fraction of the time it took Johnson, but he waited while Johnson fumbled his way through, disappearing for periods, but always trotting back before long. Johnson feigned indifference, but during these absences, he always kept a keen eye out, wondering what it was that had piqued the dog's curiosity, and whether he'd found something more interesting to do than hang out with a bloke. The longer the absence, the more firmly Johnson accepted that their dalliance was over, and that he was alone once more. And the dog's reappearance stirred greater affection with each reconvention. In the evenings, Leslie never hassled Johnson. They sat together at sunset while man ate, dog making easy society. Leslie's facile devotion confused Johnson. Humans try to understand animals in terms of their needs, and an interaction with a beast must be explicable within the bounds of either eating or reproduction. It didn't seem like Leslie was there for either. Or Johnson hoped not, anyway. Johnson had little noticed, but he was moving faster now. A gentle, tranquil love had entered his day-to-day, and to be loved lent him energy. Some combination of Leslie's undeniable athleticism and carefree fidelity struck a chord with Johnson, who discovered the admiration he had lacked for other dogs. Beside Leslie, he felt long and gangly, awkward and poorly adapted, outshone in every department by a homeless dog. But he didn't mind. It was somehow an honour that this dog, the true master of the Armenian hills, so readily waited for Johnson while he stumbled and staggered at a snail's pace. If Johnson believed that the trail would improve as it dropped into Dilijan National Park, he was soon proven mistaken. Now outside the jurisdiction of farmers keeping the land to earn their keep, wildness reigned. The very land seemed knotted, tangled, constructed by the great green lady for the destruction of a hiker's will. It was possible to walk 3 feet parallel to a passable trail without even knowing it, so dense was the foliage. While Johnson engaged in a 45-minute scuffle with 200 meters of dried-up riverbed, Leslie carved countless paths through the scrub. Each time he returned to a war-weary Johnson Farside, unable to understand how different they were. Farside cursed the futility of a companion so skilled at the very activity with which he was so bitterly struggling, and one so powerless to help. At last, the terrain tidied itself up, and a scuff-kneed Johnson smiled again as Dilijan crept into view. In 3 hours, he'd be home and hosed, him and Leslie. He wondered what he might do with Leslie, once they reached the city. Leslie was clearly not a city dog. If the hound refused to stay with him while he rested, would he forfeit a day's repose in favour of a companion for the next stage? They'd known each other a mere 48 hours, but Johnson could little imagine continuing alone. On the descent, Leslie and Johnson passed a group of hikers on their way up, some 50 tourists guided front and back by Armenian adventurers. Suddenly, Johnson started. They hadn't seen another human being since the cowherd with whom Leslie arrived. These hikers were many to his view, and they were heading back into the hills from which the dog had come. Johnson's mind raced. Was Leslie truly homeless? Was this just a mini-break, a micro-adventure? His association with Johnson just a fling? Johnson realised with a shudder that he'd made of Leslie that which he wanted him to be. He'd pushed and pulled the dog to fit him into his own narrative. True, they had shared their tender moments, but who's to say the dog felt the same? Johnson may have been his third hiking partner that week. He probably was, Johnson decided. Man accepted dejectedly that dog had lived a life before him and would go on living after, and what seemed like a thing of clarity, of significance and profundity, would be but an unrecognisable speck when all was said and done. Hell, his name wasn't even Leslie. The 50-strong horde of hikers huffed and puffed their way past Johnson, and each one he stared at with a wash of inferiority. As for himself and Leslie, maybe their time had come. At that moment he looked dead ahead to the bottom of the hill a few hundred meters on, at the convergence of 2 paths. Sitting at the junction, panting and waiting, was a familiar face. He cares. My God, he cares. This may have started out as a marriage of convenience, but convenience has come and gone, and the dog remains. Leslie. Johnson, teary-eyed, thought they might embrace, but when he reached the junction, Leslie trotted on with his own inimitable air of insouciance. Farside was a bit confused by it all, and wondered whether 3 weeks away from civilization was taking its toll on his sanity. It was impossible to know how the dog felt. It was binary whether he stayed or left, but anything happening inside his little head was mere conjecture. Of course, Johnson would have him for as long or as short as Leslie purposed. Hardly 50 metres on from the junction was a small house enshrouded in scrub. A fast walker could have missed it entirely, so squat and hidden was it. Dark bricks of various sizes were piled haphazardly, joined by cement slathered in between. The trail traced a path around the house to its right, passing through a narrow avenue bordered on the other side by a line of bushes. Leslie led the way. As the pair rounded the corner into the narrow pass beside the house, an eerie silence fell. Like in a film, just before something dramatic happens, the music that's been playing almost unnoticed throughout the film, telling us how to feel, it stops, and the emptiness that it leaves is all that suspense is. The wind dropped, and not a leaf rustled. A keen ear might have heard the pitter-patter of Leslie's carefree footfall, maybe a pant from an open mouth. That same ear would have been the first to hear the faint jangle of a chain, a sleepy growl that quickly graduated to a furious bark. A rigorous eye would have caught the flash of muddy brown fur atop thick, bulging muscle. Leslie led the way. Why didn't he know what was about to happen? Shouldn't the eyes and ears of a wild dog be made for this? This is part of the job. But Leslie missed all the warning signs, and by the time he and Farside understood the gravity of the situation, they were already surrounded. 3 hounds leapt from the bush, howling. The sheer power of the bark betrayed the beast's strength. It bespoke a life led for the sole purpose of violence. One dragged from its neck a chain snapped off from its fastening, and the faint metallic clink somehow penetrated. And on top of their huge skeletal heads lay the stumps where ears once were. For a moment the hounds formed up. 2 blocked the passage, 1 impeded any retreat. Their bodies swelled and pulsated. Johnson clutched his hiking poles and barked back, but he could hardly hear his own yelp. He was fooling no one. These dogs could smell fear. He was fooling no one. These dogs could smell fear, and the pair reeked of it. He stole a glance down at Leslie, who didn't even quiver. He was frozen. His terror rooted him to the spot, but there was a flicker of conviction in his eyes. In that moment, Johnson wanted to take Leslie in his arms. The chained hound pounced, and Leslie took the only recourse left to him. He picked a spot just to the far side of the hound at the rear and sprinted back the way they'd come, towards the hills. As he passed, the beast lunged at him with an open mouth, and Leslie stumbled. A huge incisor caught his flank and drove him into the bush to the left. He skidded on the leafy floor, found his footing, and flew. The hounds blocking the path surged past Johnson in pursuit, almost knocking him off his feet. Their huge shoulders exploded into motion, giant leaps to Leslie's scurry. All 3 gave chase. They flooded around the house and out of sight. Johnson stood in the passage, alone. Johnson Farside fell twice before he reached Dilijan. His knees were quivering, and his mind was elsewhere. He looked over his shoulder almost every minute, praying that Leslie would appear. The day grew long and wearisome as Johnson Farside neared Dilijan. The grey sky darkened without fanfare. His bag weighed heavy and deep on his shoulders, but nothing could weigh as heavy as the pit he carried in his stomach. The day grew long and wearisome, and then it ended. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you did, and maybe I'll read another one week. A few weeks ago, I voiced my curiosity as to whether you can truly describe the company of other human beings as a simple joy. And I haven't quite decided yet, but I think the company of animals totally can be, and it is for me. There's a cat called Dog that lives at my house. That is the truest way I can phrase what's going on. Dog is a cat, and he's not our cat. He belongs to our neighbours 2 doors down, but the best part of 8 years ago, our cat died and Dog moved in. We called him Dog mainly to deal with the guilt of the fact that we were letting in and feeding and loving a cat that wasn't ours. It's unclear whether it was the chicken or the egg, whether as a result of nature or nominative determinism, but Dog turned out to be a lot like a dog. Probably more like a dog than like a cat. First of all, he is absolutely gigantic. Most people who see him say that they have never seen a bigger cat. In fact, I've kept account of how many people, upon seeing him, claim he is the biggest cat they've ever seen. We're on 9. If you've seen Dog and you think he's the biggest cat you've ever seen, please get in touch. He likes a bit of rough. I don't mean to objectify him. He'll just put up with quite a lot of quite vigorous tummy rubbing. He also snores really loudly. It's hard to concentrate if you're in the same room as him. He likes ham, but will only eat it if you feed it to him from your hand. He likes tuna, and he pushes the tin around the room with his head when he eats it. He's quite an old man now, and he acts like it. During the daytime, he's got a constant eye roll on, but at night he gets really sociable, almost like he's drunk. He'll come over and try and sit on me when I come back from a night out. It's pretty nice. I like trying to understand how much Dog is able to comprehend and how similar our brains are. The way that generally works is that I assume common sense from him, and then he does things that prove me wrong. The best example is this. Part of our peculiar relationship with Dog was for many years based on the fact that he could not enter our house of his own accord. We had cats before him, Barney, Buster and Luigi, so we had a cat flap. But all our late cats, God bless them, were a little bit wimpy and middle class, so sometimes some of the more brutish neighbourhood cats would come in and eat all their food. So we bought a microchip cat flap. For the uninitiated, this is a cat flap that has a microchip scanner and grants access only to cats who have permission. Perfect for wimpy cats. For the best part of 8 years, we've had the cat flap set in such a way that Dog could leave as he pleased, but we would have to let him in through the door if he wanted to come in. We did this, I suppose, in a vain attempt to retain some control over the situation, a situation that Dog was clearly in the driving seat of from the start, despite not having opposable thumbs. Slightly embarrassing for the rest of us. That being said, when everyone was out of the house, Dog had no way of coming in, and quite often we would come home to find him sitting outside the back door waiting for us. Finally, last Christmas, things changed. My family and I went on holiday for a few days, and we decided that, it being winter and Dog being almost 15, it was time to give him the keys to the castle. This was easier said than done. The sharper amongst you may have worked out that to do this you have to shove the cat through the tunnel head first in order for the cat flap to read its microchip and grant it access for future. This was quite a stressful experience for all of us. Dog's inability to speak English meant I couldn't explain to him why I, one of his best friends and perhaps even a weird older brother of sorts, was shoving him head first through a tunnel. Although that does sound like something my older brother would have done to me. He was a bit off with me for a day or two after that, but he got over it. The next challenge was to teach him that the cat flap was now a valid way of getting into the house. Again, lack of English was a problem. He would sit at the back door waiting to be let in, and I would stand on the other side of the door, exaggeratedly refusing to let him in, and pointing furiously towards the cat flap. He didn't get it. Doesn't understand pointing, I thought. Interesting. Then I put my arm through the cat flap and beckoned him over. He didn't get that either. So then we started putting a tin of tuna in the cat flap tunnel. I knew better than to shove him through again. I figured he'd only further associate the cat flap with trauma. So we just left tuna in the cat flap tunnel all the time for a week in the hope that he'd just hang out in the tunnel and then eventually he'd just push his head through and the penny would drop. Or maybe next time the house was empty, he'd just give the flap a go. One day, my mum and I came home together after a full day out, and Dog was inside, on the armchair in the living room. We'd been out for at least 10 hours, and he must have gone for a wee at some point. There was no wee on the carpet, so we had to assume that he'd worked it out, and we were so excited. We rushed him. He had no idea why we were so excited. He may not have even known that we were excited, to be honest. So one way or another, he worked it out. I did assume that it was more monkey on a typewriter than stroke of critical genius, but I was proud of him. Clever boy. The next day, I was sitting on the sofa by the back door. I heard a little peep from behind me. I turned round and saw him. Dog was sitting outside the back door, waiting to be let in. Never have I more strongly wished that Dog spoke English. It wasn't so much that I wanted to tell him what was going on, as I wanted him to tell me what he thought was going on. Like, what is it, Dog? How can you come in through the cat flap yesterday and not understand that you can come in through the cat flap today? That's when I realised you can't assume anything when it comes to a cat's brain. There is no guarantee that using the cat flap once means you can use it again. Fair enough. I'm not sure why you wouldn't try, but fair enough. Or maybe he just didn't remember ever having done it. I can't know that he would remember something that happened the previous day. I just wished he could comprehend the significance of what had happened, that after 8 years of waiting outside the back door, he could now come and go as he pleased. I think that Dog has nothing that we could liken to human critical thinking. His brain is a collection of habits. He assesses the scenario and does whatever he's used to doing in that scenario. When there's people in the living room, he waits to be let in. I suppose that when we're not there, he comes in through the cat flap. Old habits die hard if you have a brain the size of a golf ball. Dog still waits outside the door to be let in, and that's fine. Dog's different way of seeing the world is utterly refreshing. I love the way his face rarely matches the vibe of the situation he's in. I love the face he makes when I turn the lights on in the kitchen and he's just been fast asleep. I love putting my thumb into his paw in between his toes. I love picking him up and putting him over my shoulder, even though I'm not sure he loves it. He's simple and honest, and I love him for that. Apparently octopi are intelligent too. It's a weird one, intelligence, isn't it? Because it's all relative. We consider intelligence to be things like having a really impressive memory or being really good at the countdown quizzes. Dogs, octopi, dolphins would all be rubbish at that, but apparently they're really smart. I read an article on the Natural History Museum website called "Octopuses Keep Surprising Us." First of all, what is the plural of octopus? I feel like I've used every possible variation and I don't think I've ever been right. It's like it's constantly changing based on stock prices or the weather or something. There should be an app where you can check the current correct plural form of the words octopus, formula, appendix. Like, no, actually, it's formula. Wait, now it's formulapses. Octopuses keep surprising us. Octopi have 3 hearts. That's pretty common knowledge, right? No massive surprise there. Do you know how many brains they have? 9. Yep, 9 brains. 1 in their weird, freakish alien head, and then 1 in each tentacle. A brain per tentacle. Do you know how octopus catch their prey? They catch crabs with their suckers, pull them into a little beak in the middle of their bodies, and they lick them to death. Octopi have 9 brains and 3 hearts, and apparently they're one of the most intelligent creatures on Earth. Did you know they've got a little flap on the back of their head where you can turn it inside out? Isn't that mental? Octopodes put all of the effort into the brains and the hearts and stuff, but if you have thumbs, you can turn its head inside out. That's literally like building a supercar and then leaving it on the street with all the doors open and the keys in the ignition. It's pretty silly. Everything's pretty silly, but it's quite fun to believe it. After all, nothing can ever be completely true or completely false. You can't know whether the story of Johnson Farside is true or not, and nor really can I. It's a bit of both. It's true in as much as it shows you something. It's shown me some things. It's left me feeling that it's quite hard to truly know how someone else feels, and that maybe it's pointless to try. People come and go. Things get smaller really fast in the rearview mirror as you're driving away. Sometimes it feels nice to really feel stuff, but in a world where there are no absolutes, ultimately nothing's worth the trouble. I'll leave you with a pearl of wisdom shared with me by the great Mr. Ted when I failed to make the school hockey team. He said, "Today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper." I'm hoping that right now I'm in the desert savouring a sip of water in the heat, or settling down to cook dinner on a dune, and all the while seeing everything from above for a while. As the sun starts to poke out again, go camp on a hill. There's nothing like it to put it all in perspective. All love, young grumblings. Schlaf gut, lieber Prinz.